Alright, welcome back to the channel. We're on to the rest of the Louisiana teams this year, basically being a Sun Belt special with having three different teams that I'm covering off of it. Ragin' Cajuns, Louisiana Tech, and Louisiana Monroe, as little as we want to actually take care of them. But we'll start off with Louisiana Tech. In this case, the team that was very good defensively, one of the best in the country at getting interceptions, 21 total interceptions, which was tied for second in the country. And wherever the team was even competent offensively, they were basically unbeatable in anybody they went against. 6-0 whenever they scored 27 or more points per game. But yeah, only happened half of the season. For a team that ended up 8-5, including winning their bowl game in the Independence Bowl over Coastal Carolina, that was an ugly game to watch. I was actually at that game in person. At this point, they bring back their starting quarterback and their quarterback from injury. Yeah, the Bulldogs, they bring back Blake Baker. Not that Blake Baker. That Blake Baker. Unfortunately for La Tech, that's probably one that's a little less optimistic for them. He got hurt tearing his ACL last season in the Delaware game, replacing him with Trey Kukoc, and neither one really were that positive. At least Baker had a positive touchdown to interception ratio. But you do actually have to remember, La Tech was in the news a decent bit this offseason because they transferred over from Conference USA to the Sun Belt. But Conference USA was not a big fan of that idea, so they still scheduled a full conference slate for what they were going to be scheduled for Conference USA in their 8 games and the Sun Belt games. So it looked like their schedule was like a full 18 games, which would be absolutely insane. Make that 20 games because they couldn't just have an 18-game schedule to make them feel like NFL players. No, they had to 2-up them. Like, look at this schedule. There's a full 9 games that they have set for October. There's even one game against Arkansas State that they don't even show a TBA date. It took like 2-3 months ago before they actually set aside their differences and $8 million. And the fact of La Tech finally being with the other Louisiana teams as well, ahead of the other 2 Louisiana teams that I'll speak of, Lafayette and Monroe. Now, in this case, despite being the highest mark for Louisiana in the conference, they actually have nobody at running back coming back. 0 carries of returns, not just from ones that are on the roster from last year, but for ones that are currently on the roster. Not a single person. For a team that nearly had 200 yards per game rushing, the biggest strength of their offense is squat. Now, yes, they do bring back their leading receiver with Eli Finley at tight end, 444 yards receiving, and their top wide receiver transfer in Marcus Carwise Jr. to pair with Jalen Mickens to be their top 2 wide receivers. For a team so devoid of rushing acumen on this roster, besides the quarterbacks themselves, they need to have more of a passing game than they had in the previous season, by far. Now, defensively, last year for a team, they were basically an average defense, giving up just over 370 yards per game, and being a very highly penalized team, being the worst in the country. They were also 3rd in the country in interceptions with an entire 20. And teams only completed about 55% of their passes. The secondary was very good, especially Jakari Foster, who led the country with 8 interceptions on the year. The fact that he's not even on an NFL roster, even just to get into training camp, is absurd. Yes, they lose their top 3 players in interceptions on the team. They combine for 14 of those 20 interceptions. So, yes, you're expecting that the secondary play is going to be a little bit closer down to the mean, but at that time, you'd also think that a little bit of the more disciplined play that you got from back then is going to be a little bit more subdued this time. But if you see their schedule, they get to start off with the Northwestern State game, then they get 2 road matchups against Power 4 teams that they're likely getting blown out with, and then Army. All 4 of your non-conference games they get done with already. After that, there's only 2 games the entire rest of the season that they're expected to be underdogs. That is a late October matchup against Old Dominion, probably one of the favorites for the entire Conference USA, and Georgia Southern, who is actually going to be quarterbacked by Max Johnson, a 7th-year quarterback that, how is he still in college? All the COVID stuff should be way out of view at this time. Whatever. But for a team you were seeing that was 8-5 last year, their projections tend to be closer to that same mean this year. And also the fact that a bottom 20 budget of a team in general is still expected to make a bowl game, is still expected to compete towards the top portion of their conference. That's actually some pretty solid work from the coaching staff. Sonny Cumbie coming back for his 5th season. Before last season's 8-5 year, he was only 11-26 through the first 3 seasons, so it's on the rise up for Louisiana Tech. The same cannot be said whatsoever for Louisiana Monroe. Whenever the biggest, most influential team that happens to them is the fact of SJ Tuohy, yes, that SJ Tuohy from The Blind Side, not the actor, but the actual person. He becomes the athletic director for the team. They get a hospital to be able to sponsor them. They struggle to get sponsors whatsoever. They had worse sponsorship than you'd get at a Louisiana Tech game. So they were like bottom 5 budget for anybody in Division I. For the simple fact, they had their coach, their current coach, was their temporary general manager who took care of all of the athletic directing parts of the team. And now at this point, now that he's not having to go doing double work, maybe this could actually be a little bit more influential and a better product for the team. While it is a good thing Aiden Armand is coming back for his 2nd full season and portions of 3 years worth of experience, he still only had 12 touchdowns and 8 picks on the year. And really the only thing he's done since he's become the starter is he can say he took credit of beating Booty. And no, get your head out of the cover. I mean, he beat Gerald Booty in a competition in that 2024 season, so he took over for the rest of the year, and Booty was out of the squad the following year out of his eligibility. Is that low-hanging fruit of a joke for Louisiana Monroe? Maybe so, but usually the Warhawks don't give you that much to really look into as a positive, so you got to get with something. But more of the depressing portion, and I don't want to get down on the underdog because they can't really do too much on it. Right now, you look at their entire schedule, they're not favored against anybody. They're even a 1-point underdog as of this moment to Southeastern. Like, come on, it's FCS. Southeastern isn't even, yes, they made the playoffs in the FCS, but it's an FCS team. It's not even the top echelon team. It's not along the North Dakota State, South Dakota States, along those options. Wofford. You'd probably even put Nichols potentially over them. And McNeese. Like, yes, they're expected to be in the bottom of the Sun Belt. At this point, Southern Miss is really the only one that they're thought to be in any sort of competitive aspect of any team within the conference that they do play. But they do still believe they're going to have a 3-win season. Over-under ends up being 3.5, so very similar on the point of last season. At this case, you have the coaching staff that is able to focus on the team itself. They don't have to focus so much on the financials of it, building up profits or anything, trying to build a roster from. They can worry about how to best put the pieces together for the team. So I would not be surprised if they get a couple upsets or two, like UAB, 2nd game of the season. That's probably going to be more competitive than a 10.5-point deficit. Yes, I do think they're going to end up being Southeastern, but there is hope for this team. They brought in a new offensive coordinator. They brought in a new defensive coordinator. He's bringing in a new scheme of a 3-3-5 defense because of the fact that all the ones that are on the roster at the defensive line, they have no stats. Not a single stat. So you do have to build on what you have strength of. They have a strength on 4 linebackers coming back with 20-plus tackles and Noah Fleming getting 80 tackles in total. They have a full set of a secondary that has a bunch of experience from Wisconsin, Louisiana Tech, Arkansas, Mississippi State, amongst others. They have bodies that can make this team pleasing to watch, make this team competitive more than they've been in this past season. They started 3-1 last year. They were going into Northwestern in a potential spot for their last non-conference game that they could build momentum to the rest of that season. Unfortunately, once you went into conference play and the Northwest game, everything fell apart. Their top receiver from last year, yes, is gone. Their second and third receiver on the team are back. They do have potential. And I understand most people aren't going to give a damn about Louisiana Monroe. No one's really wanting them to be such a depressing watch to where it just feels like an inevitable downhill. They had Ahmad Hardy. They almost made a bowl game with Ahmad Hardy. He is doing wonders whenever he's taking a shot at Missouri. Maybe taking a shot is not the right turn of phrase, but I do hope he's actually doing better, even though he's not technically thought to be expected to be ready for the first game of the season for Missouri. But lastly, what we normally put together as a little bit more than just a dumpster fire is Lafayette, the Ragin' Cajuns. There was so much hype for last year. Walker Howard was coming in from Ole Miss, returning home to Louisiana. They had brought back their top two running backs, over 700 yards for both of them the previous year, in Bill Davis and Zylan Perry. And Shelton Sampson was coming over from LSU, the former five-star recruit. And this was going to be a great, explosive offense that they hadn't had in some time since the Billy Napier years. Before the first game ends, Walker Howard gets hurt. He really wasn't very effective in that first game. It took a while for them to get past the times of Daniel Beal to be able to somewhat incorporate Lunch Winfield into this offense and get more of a dual threat progression that this team was able to really build off of. It really took to the last 4 games of the regular season for them to really put it together with Winfield to be able to get Walker Howard out of the picture. Even though Howard was technically healthy and able to play, he just wasn't effective in any of his time period. So in that South Alabama game, whenever they were 2-6, they needed 4 straight wins to make a bowl game. Winfield goes 14 for 15 for 232 yards, 2 touchdowns, and the position's his for the rest of the year. Yes, they weren't able to come back and win the bowl game against Delaware. Ended up the season at 6-7. For the one thing on this, Louisiana had very little going out in the transfer portal. Unfortunately, off of that, coming into this year, you have Walker Howard transferring back to Ole Miss, and then you have both of those 2 running backs, their top 2 running backs, both going into Power 4 schools. Zylan Perry went to Cincinnati, and Bill Davis ended up going to Virginia Tech, joining James Franklin. As a whole, though, that's 3 of the 6 players that transferred out. Only one that really was that significant of any sort of consistent playing time is their left tackle Brian Williams going to Arkansas. And yes, once again, another Power 4 program. But this year, once again, they do bring back Shelton Sampson, who had over 500 yards receiving. Very likely going to be the top receiver again. There isn't likely going to be very much competition, as no other receiver on the roster has 100 yards receiving in their career. So a lot of this is going to be if Winfield can end up improving his passing game, even though last year it was more of a 55-45 run to pass option. With the fact of both of those top 2 running backs being gone, it's likely going to be a little bit more balanced than that, even if Winfield ends up getting a ton of design quarterback runs like he did last year. It's also fortunate that they bring back their top 2 tight ends in Caden Jensen and Brock Chappell, as well as a well-versed offensive line where you have 6 total offensive linemen that have over 400 snaps on their career, to where there is going to be a decent bit of cohesion. Yes, a bit of the receiver depth is a little bit in question for the fact of Landon Strother is going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks, and freshman Trenton Chaney had a decent chance of getting into that rotation, but he is also out for the next few weeks, so very likely not going to be involved in the early season. Defensively, though, a lot of the defensive line got gutted, except for a couple interior members, including LSU transfer Fitzgerald West. Much of their returning production does end up involving Jack St. Andrew, the linebacker, who had over 50 tackles last year, and then a couple cornerbacks in Brent Gordon Jr. and Morion Elam. Gordon having over 60 total tackles on the season, including 11 pass breakups as a true freshman, and Elam also ended up having 47 plus tackles plus 3 passes defended himself. Then you have the trio combination of Cody Jackson, Lake Bates, and Colin Jacob that combined for 70 plus tackles to end up being amongst the top 2 safeties to be going over the deep end of the defense. But really, if you look at their schedule, besides the USC game they have to play the second game of the season, the rest of the season, they get fortunate for the fact that they really don't have to play too much of the top echelon of the Sun Belt, where there is a decent shot they'll be able to go back and, after having a year off, be able to get back into the Sun Belt championship game, where the only team that they play in the upper echelon of the Sun Belt is considering Arkansas State. But if Lunch Winfield can start to develop more as a passer, and they can get a little bit more of a running game from Anthony Regan, the transfer that came from Howard, and be able to develop a little bit more of the back end of the wide receiver core outside of Sheldon Sampson, this could be a very viable team within the Sun Belt Conference, and in a simple fact of they could easily compete with the Arkansas States and the James Madisons to be able to be that top team of the Sun Belt. And wouldn't that be something if you get Lafayette going to the Sun Belt Championship to play James Madison, led by their former coach, Billy Napier? That would be something. But, yeah, that'll be the last of the trio of the Louisiana schools in the Sun Belt. And from there, there'll be one more video that goes off of a bit of the competitors and a little bit of fun ideas that I'm going off with for the group of 6. A lot of that's going to be based off American teams, and it's also going to be including that said before Billy Napier team. But more videos coming soon. We are just under a week away from the start of Division I football, and actually the first of FCS games start tomorrow, so Southeastern's coming up. But thank y'all for watching. More Louisiana content coming over soon. And once next week comes, it'll be a little bit more previews of actual games. You get Tulane versus Duke, and then you get LSU versus Clemson. A little bit of that may be more of a daily content to see if there is a more direct offense-defense preview from each of those teams, giving a little bit preview of how Duke is updated from last year, not having Darian Mensah anymore, and how Clemson and Dabo Swinney end up updating the team based off of them no longer having Cade Klubnik as a starter and any other updates that come on. But with all being said, thank y'all for watching. More content coming soon, and I'm out.